Welcome to our Bible study, and we have now this lesson for this week. This is actually a Bible study. Our lesson discussion is a Bible study, and we could get some lessons, practical lessons. We'll be talking about the Christian and work, and I'll be focusing in the practical side of our lesson discussion about the practicality of Christian and work. First, it started that work is God's idea. Okay? So when we mention about work, what is your feeling? Some people, they just so feel dreaded. They are dreadful upon mentioning about work. But I'd like to remind you, as per introduction of our lesson for this week, the Christian and work is God's idea. In the ideal world before sin, God gave Adam and Eve the task of caring for the garden. This is recorded in Genesis 2:15. So work is not the result, it's not given because man fall into sin. Work was given even before man sinned. And this is part, Sabbath was given before the fall of man, and also marriage, and also work. Work is God's gift for us. He designs it for our own good and for His glory. So, our lesson is telling us that education must teach people how to work and should understand the value of work. Work is designed by God to be a blessing, but wrong attitude towards work could be a curse. God did not curse work, but it is the ground that been cursed. And the attitude we have for work is also has something to do with whether we are happy working or not. Okay, now our lesson, let us have a summary of this, and also we'll go to the practical side, how to apply the lessons that we have in this discussion, Christianity and work. First is about the question, why do we work? In the first place, why God asked Adam and Eve to care for the garden? And I could just imagine that they are working, but they are not being burdened. And I know that God created us for activities. God created us to move. And working is part of the enjoyment. God has given us a privilege to work because He knows who made us, who created us. He knows the very system. He knows the setup of our minds that we need to be creative. We need to do something. And that is the reason of why do we work. Ecclesiastes 3:12-13. And now today, there are reasons why we are working. First, it says for economic purposes. Food to our tables, or we work because we want to earn money to pay our bills. We work to have savings for emergency, and we have something to spend for pleasure. We need to have money. So the reasons of many why they are working is not only about the sense of worth, but also the economic purposes. And there are some people who are working because they give them a sense of worth, and it gives activities to look forward, also, and gives reasons for purpose. Why do we work? Because as the testimony of some, I feel bored when I don't have work, because God put the built-in in you. Remember this. Why you feel bored when you don't have work? As I said, that I asked an individual, why do you want to work? Because no, it's boring to just stay at home and nothing to do. So you need to find some activities. Why? Because it's a built in you to accomplish something. God said, okay, I to Adam and Eve, okay, you tend the garden. You have to do something. Life is empty without it. So the first part of our lesson is the question, why do we work? Why God has given us the privilege to work, and why is it that we are working today? Well, again, I'd like to repeat the reasons. It's about the economic purposes. It gives a sense of worth, and it gives us activities to look forward, and gives reasons for purpose. And it's a built-in for us really to do something, to have activities. God made it that way. Today, we have encountered some problems when it comes to the word work. Why? Because the different attitude of individual, the attitudes that they develop about work is now the problem. So our lesson, Christianity and work, as followers of Christ, what will be our attitude? Let us review some different attitudes towards work as found in Genesis 3:19. Work today became a drudgery, and we feel it's enslaving. We work out of necessity. We don't want to work but because it's necessary, and you feel it's enslaving. We become tired of working but can't go away from it. And the other one is that money isn't the only reason to work. Working can also give you more independence and more control of your life. So the attitude, it should not be a drudgery. It's not be enslaving. You are not forced to work, but you should work because you just love to work. And you should remember that money, an economic reason, is not the only purpose why we work. Work is not a curse, it's wrong attitude towards your work or about work that make it a curse to you. So I hope that we check the attitude, our attitude towards work. Now, do you know that we are not compartmentalized? Work is part also of our spirituality. So the same as whatever we do it for the glory of God, including work that we have. The spirituality and the way we work is connected together. When you claim to be Christian, when you claim to have a connection with Christ, then even in the way we work, it will be manifested. It's not, we are not saying that our religion is set aside when I work. Whatever you claim, especially when you claim to be Christian, it could be reflected in many aspects of life, including work. So we have in our lesson discussion about the spirituality and the way we work. So the way we work is inseparable with our spiritual life, as recorded in Galatians 5:25. And our lesson is telling us that connection with Jesus Christ will manifest in the way we work. Thus, a spiritual man manifests his spirituality in the way he works. Whatever work he's engaged to do. I remember one time that there was a story of a certain young man. He applied for work, and he was interviewed about his skill in working. He did not enumerate all the skills that he had. He just said, I am believer of Jesus Christ. So in the interview said, okay, what is your qualification? What's your skill that can contribute to this to the barn, to the company that we have? And said, I am a believer of Jesus Christ. And then he continued, and I can sleep in the storm. When there is storm, I can still sleep. So he was accepted, and then that employer kept on thinking of the sentence, I can sleep in the storm. One night there was a strong typhoon, there was a storm, and that employee was thinking about the barn, and he looked for a newly hired worker, but he saw him sleeping, and he was amazed. Oh, in the storm he was sleeping, and he tried to check all the things that should be fixed, and it was all done. So that's the meaning of I can't sleep in the storm. It was all ready. Whatever storm, it was all prepared for the storm. And he can sleep well. He's not bothered. He's not worried about it because he prepared for that. He's a very good worker because he's a Christian. So, spirituality and work. The way you work has a relationship, has a connection of what you believe. When you claim to be followers of Christ, it should be reflected in the way you work, in the way the individual works. Whatever work he is engaged to do. In 2 Corinthians 5:17, therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. It's not only in the food that he is eating, in his behavior, but even in the work that he is doing. The old has gone and the new has come. This includes all aspects of our life, including the way we work. So Christianity and education, Christian education and work. What should we teach to educate people who claim to be followers of Christ? As Christian education, how do we educate our young people the way they work? Well, I have several things to share. One is God has given our hands to work so that we can find fulfillment and joy. So we should be educated that work is not a curse, that work is a privilege, that work is a gift of God to us, and that should be put in our education system. That's why here at Mountain View College before, no everybody, rich and poor, they have the assignment to work. They are trained to work, and they should enjoy working. Sometimes we are being given the value that if you have manual work because you are poor, and if you are rich, then you will not work anymore. It's wrong concept. It's wrong value about work. God has given our hands to work so that we can find fulfillment and joy. And when you work, enjoy it and do your best. Ecclesiastes 9:10. Work meaningfully for you to find joy in your accomplishment, not just for the economic reason. Again, I'd like to repeat the education that we should have and the attitude that we should have about work. You work. When you work, enjoy it and do your best. When you work meaningfully for you to find joy in your accomplishment, not just for the economic reason, not just for the pay. And this is very important thing to remember in our values about work. Very important. And I could still remember my late father who really educated me, especially in the way we work, and it really helped me. He was always reminding me, when you work, do your best. Don't just work to equal the pay that has given to you. Some people are telling, I'm just paid little, so I just put a little inputs. No, it's not only about money, it's not only about pay, but it is your joy of doing something that you have done your best. And I always remember that when I was working here as a working student, I always remember that. And that's part of that kind of attitude that really helped me graduate here at Mountain View College. I remember one time that I was hired by the missionaries here, Dr. and Mrs. Lonergan, and said, okay, you come to our studio, you have to paint because we have the educational production and part about doing some slides during the time. We don't have yet PowerPoint. So I was painting and several of us were hired. And the time will come that it's we should have an off at 5 o'clock. But that I could always remember that do your best. I could not if I could not finish my work at 5 o'clock, I'm supposed to be off, but I still go on even without pay. And those couple really was impressed with my attitude. And they paved the way for me to finish my study. But some of our friends said, okay, it's 4:45 and they stop working because they are only paid at 5 o'clock. Oh, Christian education should help us in our concept about work. Again, I'd like to repeat, friends, God has given our hands to work so that we can find fulfillment and joy. When you work, enjoy it and do your best. And work meaningfully for you to find joy in your accomplishment, not just for the economic reason. I remember the story of a certain individual, a certain visitor who tried to come to the construction area. And he interviewed one worker, said, what are you doing? And that worker said, can't you see I'm just piling stones? Then he transferred to the other individual and said, what are you doing? Can't you see we are building a cathedral? Two individuals piling stone. The other one, the thinking of his work, he just piled stone. The other one said, I have a full view of what we want to accomplish. I am a participant of the big project. We are building the cathedral. So when you work, you should really understand why are you working. When I was a dormitory dean, then we have an assignment, okay, you cut the grasses. The very purpose of cutting the grass is to beautify the place. And then they just cut the grasses and they don't just gather the cut grasses. They just spread it there and they are not getting it. The concept is that it should be beautified. So you have to have an overall view of your work. You should find meaning. Why are you doing that work? You should know the principle. Why are you doing that work? Treat any task with utmost dedication. Okay? Now we focus more in the practical aspect of our lesson discussion for this week. Remember that we are discussing the Christian and work. So summarizing all, I'd like to say that God is giving us a gift of work. So work is God's gift and He designs it for our own good. And our lesson is explaining why do we work, the value of work, and then the importance of our attitude towards working. And also our lesson is telling us that when we are followers of Christ, there is a connection between how the way we work and having Christ in our life. And in our Christian education, it should be instilled to each one of us. We should be educated that God has given our hands to work so that we can find fulfillment and joy. Again, I'd like to repeat, God has given our hands to work for what reason? For us to find fulfillment and joy. So when you're working, enjoy your work. Don't just feel it as drudgery. You just feel it that you are required for it. Don't just feel that it's a necessity for you to have pay, for you to have money, but you don't enjoy it. No, it's a blessing. And when you work meaningfully. for you to find joy in your accomplishment. And also, always remember that when you are so selective in your work, remember that when you say work, all aspects of our work, although in many people have the concept work is referring to manual work, but whatever you do, whatever your work, it's working. Enjoy your work. Okay? And there are some things that I'd like to share to you. What kind of worker are you? Are you followers of Christ? What kind of worker? What is your attitude towards work? In a certain book, there is a saying that some people are like wheels. They don't work unless they are pushed. Some people are like trailers. They have to be pulled. Some people are like kites, always up in the air, and if you don't keep a string on them, they fly away. Some people are like canoes. They have no paddle. Some people are like balloons, always pop up, and you never know when they are going to blow up. Okay? So what kind of an individual, what kind of worker are you? Are you a worker like wheels? You don't work unless you are posed. Remember that Christian education and work, your spirituality, your connection with Jesus Christ, and your concept, your attitude towards work is very important. To summarize, Christian education should teach people not to be lazy and also always targeting for an easy work. Remember that when you take it easy, it becomes hard. It will be hard to you when you work so easy, when you select easy work, then you are not developed. Christian education should teach people not to be lazy and look only for something easy. You should strike the balance in your life. Life is not all hard work. There is more to life than hard work. Christians should find meaning and purpose in their work. Christian, what's your attitude towards work? What's your education about work? How do we educate people about work? I hope that we will be thankful to the Lord for giving us the privilege to work. I hope that we will be thankful to the Lord for having the gift of work. Now, having learned this, I hope that we become good workers because we have Jesus Christ in our heart. Paul was telling the slaves during this time, now that you are converted as Christians and your master is also Christian, it does not mean that you are freed as a slave because of Christianity. The system of that time of during that time, you still remain a slave, but you become a very good slave. That's the difference between a Christian and non-Christian slaves. For us, what kind of workers are we the same with people who are not claiming to be Christians, especially Seventh-day Adventist Christians? We are Seventh-day Adventist Christians claiming to have close connection because every seventh day we have our appointment with God as a corporate worship. Is that helping us to develop as a good workers? What kind of workers? What's your attitude towards work? May the Lord God bless us as we learn something from our lesson. This is a practical aspect of our lesson discussion for this week. God's blessing be with us today.